When my home loan application got flat out denied over $42,000 in defaulted credit cards, I thought it was a massive banking error. But when I confronted my mom, expecting her to be outraged on my behalf, she just looked me in the eyes and said, "She was struggling, and you weren't using your credit anyway." My own mother had given my social security number to my younger sister while I was overseas, letting her open 3 separate high-limit credit lines and max them out completely. When I told them the banks required an identity theft police report to clear my name, my entire family declared war on me. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Exactly 11 days after filing that report, my mom called screaming about something I hadn't even known was coming. My name is Claire. I'm 28 years old, and after returning home from a 10-month overseas military deployment, all I wanted was to build a quiet, stable life. I had saved every penny, lived frugally, and kept my head down with one major goal in mind: buying my very first home. The pre-approval process was supposed to be a victory lap, a simple formality before I received the keys to my fresh start. Instead, I found myself sitting in a cold, glass-walled office, staring at a mortgage lender whose expression had shifted from warm and welcoming to deeply uncomfortable. She gently slid a document across the desk toward me. My application hadn't just been delayed, it had been flat-out denied. The reason listed was severe delinquency across 3 separate credit card accounts, totaling over $42,000 in defaulted balances, missed payments, and aggressive collection notices. My heart plummeted into my stomach. I don't own 3 credit cards. I barely use the one low-limit card I keep for emergencies, and my credit score had always been spotless. I pulled up my full credit report right there at the desk, my hands shaking so violently I could barely type. The report confirmed my worst fears. 3 high-limit cards had been opened in my name at banks I'd never visited in my life. Every single account had been established, maxed out, and abandoned while I was thousands of miles away on active duty. I drove straight from the bank to my mother's house, my mind racing at 100 miles an hour. My hands were gripped so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white. I was convinced that someone had intercepted my mail or hacked my personal data while I was deployed. I needed my mother's help to go through old documents, hoping to figure out how a fraudster could have gotten hold of my social security number and private details. When I burst through the front door, my mom was sitting at the kitchen island, calmly sipping coffee. I laid the credit reports on the counter, my voice cracking with anxiety as I explained the $42,000 in defaulted cards. I expected her to be horrified, to gasp, or to immediately offer to help me contact the police. Instead, she didn't even flinch. She took a slow sip from her mug, looked me dead in the eyes, and gave a faint, dismissive sigh. "Oh, that," she said, her tone as casual as if she were discussing the weather. "Claire, don't make a scene out of this. Your sister Chloe was going through a really tough time financially while you were gone. She needed to get on her feet." I froze, the air leaving my lungs. "What are you talking about?" "I gave her your information," my mother admitted, without an ounce of remorse in her voice. "She was struggling with her lifestyle, and you weren't using your credit anyway. You were overseas, making good money and saving everything. You didn't need it, but Chloe did. It's family, Claire. We help each other." The very next morning, I sat across from a fraud investigator at the bank, hoping for some kind of magical middle ground. But the investigator laid out the brutal truth with cold, legal precision. I had exactly 2 options. Option 1. I could personally assume the $42,000 debt, ruin my credit score for the next 7 years, and kiss my dream of buying a home goodbye. Option 2. I could file an official identity theft police report, proving I didn't authorize the accounts, which would automatically trigger a criminal investigation against the person who used my information. I desperately wanted to avoid getting law enforcement involved, so I called a family meeting that evening. I brought a legally binding contract, drafted by a lawyer friend, stating that Chloe would assume full responsibility for the debt and pay monthly installments directly to the credit card companies. I set the paperwork on the dining table in front of my sister and mom, offering them an out. But Chloe just scoffed, pushing the papers away with complete disdain. "I'm not signing that," Chloe sneered, crossing her arms. You made bank during your deployment, Claire. You're hoarding wealth while I'm barely getting by. Why should I ruin my financial future when you can just absorb it and move on? You're being completely selfish over a stupid number on a screen. My mother sat beside her, nodding in agreement. They weren't just asking for forgiveness. They were demanding my compliance, expecting me to sacrifice my entire future to cover Chloe's greed. Standing in my mother's living room, listening to my own sister accuse me of hoarding wealth while she actively destroyed my financial life, something inside me snapped. I realized then that my sacrifice meant nothing to them. They didn't see me as a daughter or a sister. They saw me as a personal safety net to be exploited. Without saying another word, I picked up the unsigned contract, walked out to my car, and drove directly to the precinct. Sitting across from the officer, my hands trembled as I handed over my military deployment records, the bank statements, and the fraudulent credit applications. Filing that identity theft report was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but the moment I signed my name at the bottom of the affidavit, a heavy weight lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer playing the victim. The legal machinery moved with terrifying speed. Within 48 hours, the bank's fraud division froze all 3 credit lines, blocking any further transactions and initiating a formal criminal investigation. Then the storm hit. My phone exploded with a relentless barrage of calls, voicemails, and violent text messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. My mother had rallied the entire extended family against me, painting me as a cold-hearted traitor who was sending her own flesh and blood to prison over a simple financial disagreement. Group chats were made solely to berate me, and social media posts accused me of abandoning family values. But as I read through the cruel messages telling me I was dead to them, I kept my head high, knowing I was simply protecting the future I had bled for. For 11 days, an uneasy silence settled over my life. The constant barrage of abusive text messages had slowed down, and I naively hoped that my family had realized the gravity of the situation and accepted the consequences. I spent those days focusing on work, trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy, and keeping my distance from everyone. Then, on the morning of the 12th day, my phone rang. It was my mother. The moment I pressed answer, her hysterical screaming blasted through the speaker so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. She was hyperventilating, sobbing uncontrollably, and hurling curses at me. Detectives from the Financial Crimes Division had just arrived at Chloe's apartment with a search warrant, seizing her laptop, phone, and financial records. "You ruined her life," my mother shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. "They're going to arrest her, Claire. How could you do this to your own sister?" But as the police investigation unfolded over the next 48 hours, the detectives uncovered a bombshell that left me completely speechless. The 3 credit cards were only the tip of the iceberg. While digging through Chloe's computer and bank records, investigators discovered that 6 months into my deployment, Chloe and my mother had attempted to take out a $50,000 personal consolidation loan in my name. To pull it off, my mother had personally forged my signature as a primary co-signer on official bank documents. They hadn't just used my credit. My own mother had actively committed felony forgery to secure money for my sister, directly implicating herself in the entire criminal enterprise. The sudden exposure of the forged $50,000 personal loan transformed a civil fraud dispute into a major criminal disaster for my family. Facing multiple felony counts of grand theft, bank fraud, and forgery, my mother and Chloe panicked. They begged for a meeting, insisting they would do anything if I agreed to drop the charges. I agreed to meet them one last time in a neutral conference room, bringing my attorney along to ensure everything was strictly on the record. My mother looked 10 years older, her eyes red and sunken, while Chloe sat terrified, staring at the polished wooden table. Gone was the arrogant sister who accused me of hoarding wealth. In her place was a broken woman staring down the barrel of real prison time. "Claire, please," my mother wept, reaching across the table. "I'll give you everything I have. Just tell the police it was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It was a choice. You chose to sacrifice me for Chloe." My attorney made our position crystal clear. I was not going to lie to federal investigators or commit perjury to shield them from their own illegal actions. Faced with irrefutable paper trails and electronic evidence, Chloe accepted a plea deal. She was placed into a strict pretrial diversion program, given 3 years of supervised probation, and ordered by the court to pay full mandatory restitution. The bank's fraud department formally absolved me of all liability, wiping the entire $42,000 debt from my record and restoring my credit score completely. I was free. 2 weeks after the legal proceedings wrapped up, I closed on a beautiful 3-bedroom house with a sprawling backyard, the exact home I had worked so hard to earn. I packed up my belongings, moved to a new neighborhood, and permanently changed my phone number. Cutting ties with my mother and sister wasn't easy, but choosing my own peace and security over toxic bloodlines was the best decision I ever made. I built a life built on truth, self-reliance, and boundaries that no one will ever cross again. Now, I'm curious about you watching this story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have filed that police report against your own family? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.